Tonight, we'll leave the waking world behind and drift into a place of gentle fairy tales, floating cloud gardens, moonlit seas, and magical realms where wonder still lingers in the air. Before we begin, I'd love to know where you're listening from tonight. Leave a comment below and say hello. Whether you're tucked beneath a warm blanket, listening beside a rainy window, or watching the stars from somewhere far away, you're always welcome here. And if you found comfort in these stories, consider subscribing and joining our growing circle of dreamers, fairy tale lovers, and gentle wanderers. Now dim the lights, settle in, and allow the day to slowly drift away. This is the story of the whale songs beneath lavender water, a soft bedtime fairy tale for gentle nights. Far beyond the edges of ordinary oceans, where the water glows lavender beneath the moon, and warm silver mist drifts endlessly across the tide, there exists a hidden sea where the whales still remember the oldest songs in the world. The songs are not ordinary music, they are living memories. Love stories carried through centuries beneath the water. Heartbreaks softened by time, promises whispered beneath moonlight. Feelings too beautiful to disappear completely. The whales carry these songs through the deep ocean currents, singing them endlessly beneath the stars so the world will not forget tenderness. Very few creatures can understand the meaning hidden inside the melodies, but the mermaids can, especially one mermaid named Seraphel. Seraphel lived near the edge of the lavender sea inside a glowing coral sanctuary hidden beneath enormous pearl arches and drifting gardens of moon lilies. Her home rested deep beneath the water, where warm currents curled softly through crystal caves, glowing with pale blue and silver light. Soft curtains woven from sea silk drifted through the rooms like floating ribbons. Tiny lanternfish illuminated the halls at night. And outside her windows, glowing whales moved slowly through the dark water like enormous celestial spirits. Unlike the other mermaids, Seraphel rarely joined the underwater festivals or moonlit dances held beneath the coral palaces. Instead, she spent most of her time listening to the ocean currents, listening to the whales, listening to the ancient songs hidden deep beneath the water. From the time she was very young, Seraphel possessed a rare gift. She could understand whale songs perfectly, not simply hear them, understand them. Every note carried emotion, every melody contained memories, and every haunting sound drifting through the lavender ocean told stories older than kingdoms themselves. Some songs spoke of lovers separated by storms centuries ago. Others carried memories of peaceful nights beside glowing shores now lost beneath the sea. But the gentlest songs were always the ones about longing, the quiet kind, the kind that lingers softly inside a heart for years. Seraphel loved those songs most, perhaps because she understood them too well herself. Although Seraphel spent her life surrounded by beauty, she often felt strangely distant from the world around her. The other mermaids described her as kind and dreamy, but also quiet in ways they did not entirely understand. While others laughed beneath floating lantern coral and danced through moonlit tides, Seraphel drifted alone through glowing underwater gardens, listening to whale songs echoing through the deep. Sometimes she wondered whether loneliness simply became part of certain souls. A soft ache, a feeling of waiting for something unnamed. Every evening she swam upward toward the surface waters where the lavender sea reflected the moonlight like silk. There she rested among enormous floating moon lilies, while distant whales sang softly beneath the waves, their songs wrapped around her gently like warm currents. And though she never admitted it aloud, she often wished one of those songs might someday belong to her. One evening, while silver rain drifted softly across the ocean surface, Seraphel heard something unusual within the whale's music. At first, it sounded faint, almost hidden beneath the other melodies, but then she heard it clearly. A name. Elias. Seraphel stopped swimming immediately. The whales had never sung a human name before. Curious, she drifted deeper beneath the waves where 3 enormous moon whales moved slowly through the glowing currents. Their pale silver bodies shimmered beneath the lavender water while tiny glowing fish circled their fins like drifting stars. Again, the melody rose around her, gentle, haunting, filled with longing. Elias. Then came another feeling hidden beneath the song. Loneliness, deep loneliness, and something else too. Hope. Seraphel followed the whales through the night ocean while the melody continued echoing softly through the sea. Eventually, the whales rose toward the shoreline far beyond the coral sanctuary, and there, sitting alone beside the water, was a human man. The young man sat wrapped in a cream-colored blanket beside a lantern glowing softly against the sand. Dark curls moved gently in the ocean wind while warm rain mist drifted through the evening air. He stared toward the sea with the quiet expression of someone listening carefully for something only they could hear. Seraphel remained hidden beneath the water at first. She watched him quietly while whale songs rolled softly through the tide. Then Elias spoke. "I know you're out there tonight," he whispered toward the waves. Seraphel blinked in surprise. The young man smiled faintly. "I hear them too sometimes," he admitted softly. "The whales." Warm curiosity bloomed gently inside her chest. Humans were not supposed to hear the songs clearly, and yet, somehow, he did. That evening, Seraphel rose carefully from the water beneath the moonlight. The moment Elias saw her, he did not look frightened, only quietly amazed, as though he had spent years hoping the sea might someday answer him back. After that night, Seraphel returned to the shore often, and every evening Elias waited beside the lavender water beneath glowing lanterns and drifting rain mist. Together they listened to the whale songs rolling softly beneath the tide. Elias explained that he had always felt drawn toward the ocean without understanding why. Even as a child, he claimed the sea sounded alive to him, comforting somehow, as though something beneath the water had always been calling gently for him. Seraphel understood the feeling immediately, because she too had spent her entire life listening for something she could never fully explain. Their evenings became soft and familiar. They watched moon whales drift through the distant mist, while warm rain fell softly across the sea. Sometimes Elias read poetry aloud while Seraphel floated beside the shore, listening quietly. Other times they simply sat together in comfortable silence, while whale songs echoed beneath the waves, and slowly, without either of them realizing exactly when it happened, the loneliness inside both of them began softening. One night, during the height of the silver moon tides, the oldest whale in the Lavender Sea approached the shoreline. Its enormous glowing body moved slowly through the mist, while moonlight shimmered across its pale silver skin. The whale's song rose softly around them, gentle, beautiful beyond words. Seraphel closed her eyes as she listened, and suddenly she understood. The song was not merely describing love, it was blessing it. For centuries, the whales had carried human love stories safely through the ocean, so those feelings would never disappear completely from the world. And now, they were adding a new story to the current. Theirs. Tears shimmered softly in Seraphel's eyes as the melody wrapped warmly around them both. Elias looked toward her quietly. "What are they saying?" he whispered. Seraphel smiled softly through her tears. "They're telling the sea to remember us." Long afterward, sailors crossing the Lavender Ocean sometimes spoke of strange whale songs drifting through the mist at night. Some claimed the melodies sounded almost human. Others swore they heard laughter hidden gently within the music, and on certain quiet evenings, people standing beside the sea would occasionally glimpse a glowing mermaid drifting beside a lantern-lit shore while whales sang softly beneath the moonlight nearby. Deep beneath the lavender tide, the whale songs continued endlessly through the ocean currents, soft, full of longing and tenderness. And among those songs now lived the story of a lonely mermaid and the human boy who listened closely enough to finally hear her heart calling back through the sea. The end. This is the story of the unicorn garden that bloomed for two. Hidden deep within a valley, untouched by time, there was once a garden where unicorns wandered freely beneath glowing skies of blush, pink, and lavender. The flowers there bloomed according to emotion. Tenderness awakened the roses, longing opened the lilies, and love, when it arrived pure and true, caused the entire valley to glow like dawn spilling across still water. The hidden place was called the Unicorn Garden. Very few people ever found it, and those who did were never quite the same afterward. Her name was Faye. She lived alone in a small cottage near the edge of an ancient forest where pale flowers climbed the trees and soft mist drifted across the ground every morning. The cottage itself was warm and peaceful. Cream-colored curtains moved gently in the breeze, and shelves filled with dried flowers and glowing glass jars lined the walls. Outside her windows, tiny creek waters flowed over smooth stones, with a sound so soft it often lulled her to sleep in the afternoons. To most people, Faye appeared calm, gentle, content. But deep inside her lived a quiet loneliness she rarely allowed herself to examine too closely. There had once been someone she loved deeply. She had loved him softly, the way sunlight loves quiet water. But life had carried them in different directions before either of them had found the courage to speak honestly about what they felt. Years had passed since then. Still, sometimes during quiet evenings, she would catch herself wondering if somewhere in the world he ever thought of her too. One evening, while twilight painted the forest in shades of lavender and pale gold, Faye wandered farther than usual beyond the trees. The air smelled faintly of roses after rain. Tiny glowing moths drifted through the mist around her. Then she saw the valley. The forest opened suddenly into an enormous meadow unlike anything Faye had ever seen. Rolling hills of velvet grass stretched beneath skies glowing with soft pink dusk light. Crystal streams wound through endless fields of flowers that shimmered gently as though lit from within. The air itself felt warm and dreamlike. Petals drifted slowly through the breeze without ever touching the ground. And scattered throughout the valley were unicorns. Some rested peacefully beneath flowering trees. Others wandered through the tall grass in graceful silence. Their coats shimmered in shades of pearl white, pastel pink, and soft cream. Their manes moved like flowing silk. Each horn glowed faintly with pale golden light. Faye stood perfectly still. The valley felt sacred somehow, as though every flower and every breath of wind carried quiet magic. Then one of the unicorns lifted its head and looked directly at her. It was larger than the others, with a luminous white coat and pale blush-coloured flowers woven naturally through its mane. Slowly it approached her. Faye felt no fear, only warmth. The unicorn stopped directly in front of her and lowered its head gently. Its emerald eyes seemed impossibly kind. Then, to Faye's astonishment, the flowers surrounding them began to bloom. Hundreds of soft pink roses opened all at once across the valley floor. "You've awakened the roses." The voice startled her gently. Faye turned and saw a man standing several feet away among the flowers. He wore soft cream-coloured clothing embroidered with silver thread, and long strands of dark hair moved softly in the evening breeze. But it was his expression that caught her attention most. He looked at her as though he already knew her somehow. "My name is Kaelin," he said softly. Faye looked around the glowing valley in wonder. "You care for all of this?" she asked quietly. Kaelin smiled faintly. "The unicorns do most of the work," he replied. "The garden simply listens to hearts." As they walked slowly through the valley together, Kaelin explained the strange magic of the hidden place. The flowers responded to emotion. Every feeling created something new. Joy awakened golden blossoms. Hope caused pale blue flowers to bloom beside the streams. And love, real love, made the valley glow brighter than sunrise. "The garden has been quiet for a long time," Kaelin admitted softly. "The flowers still bloom, but not the way they once did." Faye glanced toward him curiously. "Why?" Kaelin looked out across the valley for several long moments before answering. "Because people stopped believing love could last," he said quietly. Faye returned to the unicorn garden the next evening, and the evening after that. Soon, the hidden valley became part of her life in ways she could no longer separate from herself. Each day she wandered the glowing flower fields beside Kaelin. Together they gathered silver pears beneath crystal trees, while tiny fairy creatures fluttered around them carrying strands of light. They brushed flower petals from resting unicorns and listened to soft whale-like songs drifting mysteriously through the valley winds. At dusk, warm lanterns appeared floating above the gardens automatically, glowing in shades of blush pink and gold. Everything about the hidden place felt soft, dreamlike, safe, and slowly Something inside Faye began to bloom again too. She laughed more easily there. She slept more peacefully afterward. The loneliness inside her no longer felt endless. One evening, while they rested beside a glowing creek surrounded by lilies, Kaelin looked toward her quietly. "The flowers have not bloomed like this in many years," he admitted. Faye glanced around. The valley had become radiant. Soft pink roses stretched endlessly across the hills. Golden flowers shimmered beside the streams. The air itself glowed faintly with warmth. "Why now?" she asked softly. Kaelin smiled gently, because the garden knows when two hearts are trying to find each other. Deep within the valley rested the oldest unicorn of all. Her name was Nova. She slept beneath an enormous flowering tree near the center of the garden. Her silver mane spread around her like moonlit silk, and tiny glowing birds nested peacefully within her wings. Kaelin explained that Nova awakened only when the valley reached perfect harmony. For centuries she had remained asleep, waiting. One evening, while Faye sat quietly beside the great unicorn, she felt something warm brush softly against her hand. Nova's eyes had opened. They shimmered pale gold in the twilight. The enormous unicorn looked directly at Faye and Kaelin together. Then, slowly, the valley began to glow. Flowers opened across every hillside. Streams shimmered brighter. The sky deepened into shades of lavender and rose gold. Above them, tiny star-like creatures drifted through the air. And for the first time in years, the unicorn garden fully awakened. Later that evening, beneath glowing skies and drifting petals, Kaelin finally spoke quietly. "I used to believe the garden existed to protect the unicorns," he admitted. "But I think I was wrong." Faye looked toward him softly. "I think the garden exists to protect love," he continued. "The kind people often abandon because it feels too hard to keep it." Warm emotion rose inside Faye's chest. Steady, certain. Kaelin reached for her hand slowly. When their fingers intertwined, the flowers surrounding them bloomed brighter than before, and somewhere in the distance, the unicorns lifted their heads toward the glowing sky. Long afterward, people sometimes spoke quietly of strange dreams involving glowing valleys and unicorns wandering beneath lavender skies. Some claimed they smelled roses after rain while passing through the old forest. Others said they saw pale golden creatures moving softly through the mist at dusk. But very few ever found the garden itself, because the unicorn garden did not appear for wandering feet. It appeared for wandering hearts. The end. This is the story of the Cloud Garden, where fairies raise lost feelings. High above the world, beyond the reach of storms and stars, there exists a hidden place made entirely of clouds. These clouds are warm beneath your feet and soft as velvet blankets fresh from the sun. They drift slowly through skies painted in blush pink, lavender, pearl blue, and pale gold. The air there smells faintly of sugar, rain, and blooming flowers after morning dew, and hidden among those floating gardens live the fairies. Tiny glowing creatures with translucent wings that shimmer like flower petals beneath sunlight. Most humans never see them, but the fairies have always watched the world below carefully, because they are the keepers of lost feelings. Whenever someone forgets joy, a glowing fruit appears somewhere in the cloud gardens. Whenever love is pushed aside or hidden too deeply, delicate silver vines begin blooming among the clouds. And whenever grief becomes too heavy for a human heart to carry alone, the sorrow rises gently into the sky and falls there as silver rain. The fairies care for these emotions carefully. They protect them until the hearts they belong to are ready to feel them again. This is the story of a woman named Morel and the night the sky finally carried her home. Morel could not remember exactly when the numbness began. It had happened slowly over time, like winter creeping quietly across a garden. At first she only noticed little things. Music no longer moved her the way it once had. Sunsets became beautiful but distant, as though she were viewing them through glass. Even laughter felt faint and far away. People still described her as kind, gentle, peaceful. But inside herself, Morel often felt hollow, as though something essential had quietly drifted away while she was distracted surviving ordinary life. She lived alone in a small apartment overlooking the city. Every evening she watered the flowers on her balcony, though she barely noticed their scent anymore. At night, she curled beneath soft blankets with books she rarely finished. Sometimes she would place a hand against her chest and wonder why everything inside her felt so quiet. Just absent. One evening, rain began falling softly outside her windows. The storm clouds glowed lavender beneath the city lights, and somewhere in the distance, thunder rolled gently across the sky. Morel stood outside on her covered balcony. Then something unusual happened. A glowing petal drifted downward from the clouds. It landed softly on her foot and glowed faintly pink. Morel stared at it in confusion. Then another petal appeared, and another. Soon, dozens of glowing petals drifted slowly through the rain like floating pieces of sunset. The air outside shimmered softly. The storm clouds above her balcony began glowing gold and rose-coloured around the edges, and before Morel could fully understand what she was seeing, the wind lifted her gently from the ground. The sensation was not frightening. It felt warm, weightless, as though the sky itself had wrapped her carefully in soft light. The city disappeared slowly beneath her as glowing clouds drifted around her body. The higher she rose, the quieter the world became. Soon all she could hear was soft humming. Tiny lullaby-like sounds carried gently through the mist. Then the clouds parted and Morel saw the garden. Floating endlessly across the sky were enormous cloud fields glowing in shades of blush pink, pearl white, lavender and pale blue. Warm rivers of light wound gently between the floating gardens. Flower petals drifted endlessly through the air. Crystal bridges connected towering cloud islands covered in glowing vines and fruit trees made of soft golden light. And everywhere, fairies, hundreds of them, fluttered gently through the clouds. Some carried baskets filled with glowing fruit. Others watered silver flowers blooming along the cloud paths. Tiny winged creatures, no larger than birds, drifted through the air, humming soft melodies that wrapped around the gardens like lullabies. Morel stepped carefully onto the clouds. To her surprise, they felt warm beneath her bare feet, soft and pillowy, like walking across freshly folded blankets. "You finally arrived." The voice came gently from behind her. Morel turned slowly. A fairy hovered nearby, Her wings shimmered like translucent rose petals touched by morning light. Tiny stars glowed softly within her pale golden hair. "My name is Solène," the fairy said warmly. "We have been waiting for you." Solène guided Mirelle slowly through the floating gardens. Everywhere they walked, the air shimmered with emotion. Not overwhelming emotion, gentle emotion. Soft feelings carried through the clouds like warmth through sunlight. Mirelle noticed glowing fruit hanging from the trees. Some glowed golden, others pale pink or silver blue. "What are they?" she asked quietly. "Forgotten joy," Solène explained. "When humans stop allowing themselves happiness, the feeling rises here." Mirelle looked upward. Thousands of glowing fruits swayed gently in the cloud trees above them. Nearby, silver vines curled around crystal arches, blooming with pale glowing flowers. The flowers pulsed softly like heartbeats. "And those?" Mirelle asked. "Love," Solène answered gently. "Soft love that people buried too deeply to feel anymore." As they continued walking, Mirelle noticed rain falling softly in the distance. Not ordinary rain. Silver rain. It shimmered gently as it fell through the clouds. "What is that?" she whispered. Solène's expression softened. "Grief," she said quietly. "When sorrow becomes too heavy for someone to carry alone, the sky carries part of it for them." Mirelle felt something tighten softly inside her chest. The deeper they travelled into the cloud gardens, the more Mirelle noticed strange glowing spirits drifting through the mist. Some looked like tiny floating stars. Others resembled soft animals made entirely of light. Each one glowed with a different emotion. Warm gold, pale pink, soft blue. One small, glowing creature approached Mirelle slowly. It resembled a tiny fox with feathered wings and enormous silver eyes. The creature hovered carefully beside her before gently pressing its glowing forehead against her hand. Warmth spread softly through Mirelle's chest, and suddenly she remembered a summer afternoon from childhood, warm sunlight on her face, laughter drifting through tall grass, the feeling of safety. The memory vanished almost immediately, but the feeling lingered, warm, achingly soft. Mirelle looked at Solène in confusion. What was that? "One of your lost feelings," Solène explained gently. "You left pieces of yourself behind over many years." Mirelle looked down at her hands quietly. "Can I get them back?" she whispered. Solène smiled softly. "That is why you are here." The first place Solène brought her was the Orchard of Joy. Golden trees stretched endlessly through the clouds, their branches heavy with glowing fruit that resembled peaches made of sunlight. Warm laughter drifted softly through the air, even though no one else was there. "These are the joys humans forgot they were allowed to keep," Solène explained. "Many people believe happiness must always be temporary." A fairy nearby picked one glowing fruit carefully from a branch and handed it to Mirelle. "Eat slowly," she said kindly. Mirelle bit gently into the fruit. Immediately warmth flooded her body. Just simple joy, soft, pure. Tears filled her eyes unexpectedly, because she realized how long it had been since she had felt anything so clearly. Later, Solène brought Mirelle to the edge of the silver rainfields. Gentle rain shimmered endlessly through the clouds, while pale flowers bloomed beneath each falling drop. The air smelled like rain against warm stone. Morel stepped carefully beneath the falling silver mist. The moment it touched her skin, she began crying. The tears simply arrived quietly after years of waiting. Grief she had ignored, loneliness she had silenced, love she had convinced herself no longer mattered. The silver rain carried it all gently from her, not removing it completely, only softening the weight enough for her heart to hold again. Solène stayed beside her silently the entire time. Finally, Solène guided Morel to the highest part of the floating world. At the center of the clouds rested a glowing garden filled with enormous flowering vines made of pale pink light. The flowers bloomed slowly around them, as though breathing. "This place holds the feelings humans are most afraid of," Solène said softly. "Love, hope, vulnerability." Morel stepped carefully into the garden. Immediately the flowers around her began glowing brighter. One vine slowly curled around her wrist, warm, gentle. And suddenly Morel understood something she had forgotten long ago. Feeling deeply was never weakness. It was what made life beautiful. For years, she had tried to protect herself by becoming numb. But in doing so, she had also closed herself off from joy, tenderness, wonder, and love. The flowers bloomed brilliantly around her. Soft pink light filled the clouds, and for the first time in years, Morel felt fully alive again. When morning finally arrived, the fairies guided Morel gently back toward the world below. The clouds drifted softly around her as she descended through the dawn sky. Before she left, Solène pressed a glowing flower petal into her hand. "For the days you begin forgetting again," she whispered kindly. Morel returned to her apartment just as sunrise painted the city gold. Everything looked different now. The flowers on her balcony smelled sweet again. The morning air felt warm against her skin. Even the distant sounds of the waking city carried softness she had not noticed in years. And sometimes during quiet evenings after rainstorms, Morel still looked toward the clouds above the city, because every now and then, far beyond the world, she could still see them, the glowing cloud gardens drifting softly through the sky, and tiny fairies with translucent wings tending carefully to the feelings of the world below. The end.